Tonight on Primetime, a new set of sweeping tariffs by the United States on 60 of its trading partners as it accuses them of forced labor. Now, could the move trigger a wider trade war or destabilize the global economy? Welcome to Primetime. I'm James Azimoha. The U.S. is targeting dozens of its key trading partners with a new wave of tariffs. Duties are to be imposed on almost all U.S. imports to countries including China, the United Kingdom, and most major EU economies.
The Trump administration will impose new tariffs of 10% or 12.5% on goods from 60 trading partners, including the European Union, starting Friday. The new measures come as a temporary 10% global tariff expires. The White House says the measure targets countries it believes have not done enough to stop goods made with forced labor from entering global supply chains. The move is seen as Trump's effort to restore broad tariffs after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in February that earlier reciprocal tariffs could not be enforced using emergency powers. According to official documents, the new tariffs will apply to about 99% of U.S. imports. However, several products, including oil and gas, fertilizer, and some food items, are exempt. The announcement has triggered criticism from several trading partners. The European Union Foreign Policy Chief, Kaja Kallas, says the bloc's labour standards do not support US claims.
What I've heard also, the argumentation behind that it's forced labour, sorry, but you can't say that for European Union. If you compare our labour laws to the ones of United States, people have paid vacations, we have very good conditions, labour conditions for our employees, so it's not really grounded.
France's Commerce Minister says France remains, quote, fully mobilised to defend our interests. The Bank of France governor also warned the tariffs could create more uncertainty for global trade and weigh on economic growth. Britain, meanwhile, said the new tariffs would have no negative impact on UK businesses. Australia and Brazil described the measures as unjustified, saying they will seek to have them removed. Malaysia said it was relieved its tariff rate was relatively lower compared to other countries, but pledged to continue negotiations with Washington. Chile and the Philippines also defended their labour standards, saying they remain committed to preventing forced labour while maintaining stable trade ties with the United States.
All right, now we have Ivana Vasola, professor at the State University of New York, joining us from New York. Good to have you.
Oh, thank you. Nice to have me.
Now, what is the Trump administration trying to achieve through these new tariffs, and how do they fit into its broader vision for U.S. trade policy?
According to the current administration, President Trump believes in tariffs as a way to correct, according to him, the discrepancies in international trade between the United States and essentially all countries in the world. His idea is that the United States for long has been benevolent with the other countries by allowing products from those countries to come in the United States with no tariffs or low tariffs. So his idea is to correct these imbalances, and also, according to him, the tariffs should bring industries, manufacturing companies to the United States, and according to him, to create more jobs in the manufacturing sector.
Mm-hmm. Now, how significant is the European Union's response to these tariffs, and what options does Brussels have if negotiations with Washington fail?
So, as your report have demonstrated, the reaction of the European Union at this point has been quite cautious. There are no threats. To the contrary, European Union is willing to negotiate with the United States, as we all know that the relationship between European countries, European Union, and US are not in the best moment, to say the least. So the impression is that the United States are the European Union is sincerely hoping to manage the situation of tariffs, to manage the situation of international trade with United States. Yes, and they are willing to negotiate. How this is going to evolve is very difficult to say, considering that the situation itself for United States is very difficult. Indeed, just to add something to this, in United States, there are many voices expressing perplexity with the decision of United States to antagonize with many allies by imposing tariffs on them in a moment so difficult for the United States as a result of the conflict with Iran. So the expectation was that United States likely would look for friends to deal with this conflict, but the United States is treating them with this type of aggressive trade policies.
Now, Professor, do tariffs create meaningful leverage over trading partners, or over time do they risk triggering retaliation and greater uncertainty for global commerce?
Certainly, retaliation of some countries. We can remember not long ago that China imposed heavy tariffs on US. Later on, they negotiate, but still some tariffs on China is still there. The other country that retaliate directly was Canada, and the situation between United States and Canada again. They are not in the best moment. Other countries find it difficult to retaliate because obviously they are dealing with the largest economy in the world. And this, for example, is the case of Brazil, that has complained heavily about the tariffs. Similar to other countries, the government of Brazil are saying that the allegations have no justification, allegations about forced labor. But for Brazil to retaliate is going to be very difficult, considering that in comparison, the economy of Brazil is much weaker than the economy of United States. So the only option for Brazil and several other countries is to try to negotiate at this point.
Now, Professor, where will the economic consequences of these tariffs be felt most? Is it inside the United States, among trading partners, or across global supply chains?
In my view, and not only my view, the view of important economists, analysts, the implications are both for the world and for the United States. From the perspective of the world, we can see financial markets are agitated, not knowing what to expect, still trying to measure the impact of this new round of tariffs. So the stock markets are quite unstable today in several countries, and certainly many fear total disruption of the global economy in terms of global chains, in terms of reduction of the gross domestic product of several countries. For the United States, is also disruptive, the tariffs, because tariffs, one of the consequences inside US is increase in prices of imported products. And we know that the United States imports many products from other countries. With the tariffs, these products are going to become more expensive, and this runs the risk of high inflation. And American consumers are already worrying about this because at this point, the prices of oil, petroleum are going up and affecting the lives of Americans in general, and the tariffs likely will increase the prices of other products again.
Now, Professor, after the Supreme Court limited the administration's previous tariff approach, how important is this new framework of maintaining tariff authority?
All right. So, as also your report said, the Supreme Court not long ago declared the previous tariffs that were imposed in April 2025, declared those tariffs unconstitutional because the Congress, in fact, is in charge of regulating international trade. So, the current administration decided to go for a legislation of the 1970s that gives authority to the President of the United States to impose tariffs based on unfair practices. And one of the unfair practices that is being used now for the current tariffs is that the countries are lenient, they are benevolent, they are not acting as they should in relation to forced labor. These tariffs, based on the decision of the administration, are going to persist. And again, it is well known here in the US that President Donald Trump, well before being elected president for the first time in 2016, he has been always in favor of tariffs because he believes that the other countries, usually in international trade, according to him, countries abused the United States by selling everything to US without any tariffs or very low tariffs. And so President Trump is a protectionist when we talk in terms of international trade. So for now, based on what we know, the tariffs are going to go on.
Thank you, Professor. That was Ivani Vasoler, professor at the State University of New York, joining us from New York. Thank you for your time, man.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, coming up, we look at UK Prime Minister Andy Burnham's first week in office and early criticism to some of the changes he's made. Don't go nowhere. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Now, 1 week into office, Britain's new Prime Minister is moving quickly to define his government. But with early announcements grabbing headlines, attention is now turning to what they could mean in practice. Guy Sean has more.
Well, hello from number 10 Downing Street, where Andy Burnham has completed his first week as Prime Minister with a series of eye-catching announcements, all designed to show that his government means business. Well, one headline decision has been to elevate artificial intelligence to the very heart of government, appointing Kanishka Narayan as the UK's first cabinet-level Minister for Artificial Intelligence. The move has been presented by Downing Street as a world's first, with ministers arguing AI should play a central role in boosting productivity, modernising public services and driving economic growth. Critics, though, have been quick to dismiss this as little more than a symbolic move, highlighting the lack of dedicated resources and real decision-making power at Minister Narayan's disposal. Meanwhile, the new PM has put the UK's cost of living crisis front and centre of his cabinet's agenda, instructing his ministers earlier this week to be a cost of living cabinet and announcing the removal of VAT for domestic electricity bills from October. Now, the government says the change will save the average household around £45 a year and is just the first step in a wider programme to reduce household costs. However, that announcement has prompted criticism from opposition politicians and some economists, arguing that a saving of around £45 a year, less than £1 a week, is simply just too modest to make a meaningful difference for families. Other commentators have gone even further, mocking the Prime Minister for taking a triumphant tone over a policy that delivers a daily saving of just 12 pence, just enough to buy 1 carrot or half a cut price bread roll. So as the argument over policies continues, so too a growing debate over where power in Britain is physically located. In a radical change of approach, today the Prime Minister will officially work not from this house behind me, but from a new headquarters based in Manchester called the Number 10 North, describing it as the nerve centre for a rewired Britain. Mr Burnham said Number 10 North will be the conduit through which we redistribute power and resources across the country. He added, for 40 years, power and resources have been sucked into the centre. Number 10 North will now change that by putting more power into every postcode across the entire country. So, some big changes and strong symbolic statements. But after just 1 week in office, what do we really know about Britain's new direction? And is there yet such a thing as Burnhamism? Well, to be fair to Andy Burnham, he has set out a direction of travel, a government focused on public sector reform, shifting power to previously neglected regions, easing pressure on household budgets, and an intention, at least, to support the country's tech sector. There is some clarity. New ministers are energised, and in many parts of Westminster, there is some optimism. The big questions now, though, are how far will these early headline-grabbing announcements translate into a country that feels fairer and is more prosperous? And far beyond the orbits of both old and new Number 10, what does the electorate really think of the nation's new Prime Minister? This is Guy Schoen for A News from the original Number 10 Downing Street.
Now, joining me now is Peter Barnes, political strategist and broadcaster. Join us from London. Good to have you, Peter.
Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Now, after his first week in office, what do Andy Burnham's early decisions reveal about the kind of government he wants to build?
That's a very good question, because I happen to agree with the great report that we've just watched. We don't really know the answer to that, because whilst we've got a lot of what we call vibes, and we've got a lot of positivity and a lot of energy, we're rather lacking in the detail. We're lacking in resources. We're lacking in the kind of grit and the nuts and bolts that you need to have any level of credibility when it comes to taking over in the way that Andy Burnham has done, because he has not won a general election. He's taken over from Keir Starmer, who was forced out of a leadership battle and all that kind of palaver. And, you know, we've gone through more prime ministers than I've had hot meals in a week. So, you know, it's rather ridiculous at some points. But what we're starting to see is actually the very key word. That's energy, optimism. Because what Andy Burnham is doing is what we call a policy speedrun. He's basically announcing and announcing and announcing in the hopes that it is given the idea and the feeling of movement and change, without really doing very much. Now, this is only his first week, but I will say this has actually been a bit of a week and a win for Andy Burnham. The question remains, can he actually pay for the end of the month, let alone the end of the day?
Now, speaking about lack of details, the new Prime Minister has announced major changes on AI, cost of living, and the location of government. How should we judge whether these moves represent genuine reform rather than political symbolism, as you say?
It's literally what we've just said. It's about resources. It's about how much time, effort, and power is actually moved. So if we take Number 10 North, this is Andy Burnham's kind of key, his principal diamond project that he's been on for decades, apparently, although most people in Greater Manchester would like to have been running as mayor and, you know, not trying to be prime minister yet. But it's all about, is it going to have tax raising abilities? Are the people who work in Number 10 just going to be just kind of receptionists? Is there going to be a real move of authority out of Number 10 and into Number 10 North? That's the credibility test. When it comes to things like AI, I think it is great that Andy has recognized that this is a key sector. But unless we have significant energy reform, we're not going to get it because we have the highest energy costs in Europe. So therefore, it's going to make any level of investment or any kind of expansion in this area pretty much impossible. So it's about looking at the periphery policies. It's about looking how he's going to join up government and actually make it all work together. For about the last, I would say, 20 years, the problem we've had in the UK is each government department has competed against each other for resources. We've not had a single unified strategy and an end goal, or at least a point to focus all attention on. And because of that, everything seems to have fallen by the wayside and kind of spun massively out of control. So realistically, it's about whether these things actually have any legs and whether they have any kind of real kind of vibe with the public. Is, do people feel that this is more than a headline and it's not just another politician looking for a quick policy bump, which I will say Andy Burnham is currently enjoying.
Let's look at what you just mentioned about his so-called diamond policy. How significant is Burnham's plan to move decision-making away from Westminster? And what would meaningful devolution look like in practice?
Realistically, it's power. Does it have the power to act without having to run to number 10 London every 10 minutes? That's the credibility test. If the people who have been appointed actually have the ability to do things without the Prime Minister's kind of formal sign-off at every single stage, that's actual change. That is real change. However, for me, the number 10 policy north isn't really about this kind of moving of power. It's about giving power back to northern communities of the north of England that has actually been left behind out of significant economic growth for, before I was even born. I'm from the north of England. I'm actually from the constituency where Andy Burnham represents in Makerfield. And that's an area of the country that doesn't feel like it's been moving forward with the rest of the country. It feels very left behind. And what Andy is trying to do is to give people back an element of autonomy and an element of control back in their lives. This is why number 10 North, for me, is actually, it's not really about this kind of the nuts and bolts of moving office furniture around. It's actually about the kind of identity that he's trying to create in the north of England,
Peter,
and how he's going to use that as what I predict to be moving as a general election.
So still on this, so you think moving the number 10 to Manchester is a good idea?
I think as a campaign strategy and a way to kind of motivate a selection of constituencies that the Labour Party need to win back, I think it is. In terms of practicality for government, it's going to be a categorical nightmare. I've worked in central government. You need people across the street. You need to be able to communicate very quickly and easily and know where people are and be able to convene much quicker than the 2-hour train ride it takes between Manchester to central London. The idea of it kind of being a nerve centre, which is what Andy Burnham originally announced the policy to be, I don't see working realistically. With what he wants to do, it's not going to happen. There's too much need doing. Everybody needs to be back in the room, and it's no good being on Zoom, I'm afraid. So I do think it's not going to work out the way he wants to. But if he uses it as a campaign tool in the next general election, which I think will be this year, I think he could actually get some run out of it. But in terms of it being an actual good policy, I'm still very much on the fence, though. I'm leaning towards no.
So what will determine whether Burnham's early ambitions translates into measurable improvement in people's everyday lives?
Realistically, he's identified the cost of living as what will be the number one issue at the next general election. He's done more, I think, to put that on the map for the Labour Party than Keir Starmer has done since 2024. And whilst people are rather very cynical about the 12p a day and it's about so much of a carrot and all the rest of it, what he's actually doing is he's giving economic stability to some of the poorest families. It's not about how much money they save. It's about the fact that they know they're going to save that amount of money. One of the major policies he's brought in is the restoration of the £2 bus fare cap. So that means that if you take the bus in the UK and you take multiple bus rides, it's going to cost no more than £2. If you are a low-income family, getting to and from work you usually use public transport, particularly if you're a young person, you use public transport. This is, again, it's not saving you heaps of money, but it's making sure you don't have to worry about getting to and from work. That is going to radically change a lot of people's lives. in a way that may not translate on a spreadsheet. But when you're putting it to the country for a general election as a feel-good move policy, it's very, very effective. And it is being massively underestimated by many commentators, particularly those on the right.
Now let's go back to the artificial intelligence policy. What opportunities and challenges does the Prime Minister face in turning technology ambition into government action?
Oh, that's a very good question, because the AI policy has, well, I'm actually very happy to see we've finally got a minister for it, because it's a great sector for the UK. We've led the way in many tech areas, but unfortunately, we have a lot of government ministers and politicians that don't know how to turn a computer on and how to check their email. So in terms of having kind of grown up, kind of joined up thinking on how we can actually use artificial intelligence, we have to set our expectations very, very low. But there has been a lot of policy movement in the background of the Starmer government in terms of actually putting things together. They've worked a lot with a lot of these kind of startups, and they've been trying to attract many of them to set up in the UK. So we're going to have to see how the market and the business itself and the industry of AI actually reacts to the UK being a viable place. Because as I say, with sky high energy costs, we've got a lot of employment laws, and we have a very underskilled workforce, particularly in the area of technology, which is why we have quite high levels of immigration in that sector. I think it will be a big test, but I'm very happy to see this being put on the map. I'm a big believer in AI. I think it is very much the future, and it is nice to see the government actually recognizing something that, that we can leave for tomorrow and not have to worry about for today.
Now, it's only been a week and we have a lot to say about the Prime Minister's policies already. What will voters ultimately use to judge the Prime Minister's first month in office? Is it the scale of his announcements or the results they produce?
I think it will be, I actually don't think it's going to be either of those things, if I'm being honest. I actually think the public will start to judge him on, can he just hold the ship together on steady water? We've had a lot of political instability. People are very tired of politics. They're very tired of living through major national events every 30 seconds. I know I, for one, certainly am. And what I think the public will judge him, particularly in this first month, is can he make it seem and feel different? He doesn't have to be any kind of major shift of people saving hundreds and hundreds of pounds. That's a false marker, in my opinion, because it's unlikely to happen, and the country are aware of that. What he's got to start really doing is going out into the nation and selling what he's actually going to do. And then he backs it up with the numbers. That's the key point now. We call it the big C, really, here in London, and it's that kind of credibility. It's, do you sound like you know what you're doing? It's called valence politics. And what we mean is, do you look like you're in charge? Do you sound like you're in charge? Do you actually have a grip on the reins of the nation? Because we've been spiraling for a long time. We're very sick of having to change prime ministers and the psychodramas that happen in SW1. And I think the public will judge him, basically, can he keep the job longer than, Liz Truss did when she lost to a lettuce. Put it that way.
Always good to have you, Peter. Peter Barnes, political strategist and broadcaster, join us from London. Thank you for your time, Peter.
Thank you.
All right, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Now, Iran and Iraq have agreed to deepen economic partnership and security ties after bilateral talks in Tehran. Turaj Shiralilu has more.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and Iraqi Prime Minister Ali al-Zaidi have signed a comprehensive memorandum of understanding to promote bilateral trade. 4 other deals were also signed by both sides on road transportation and administrative matters. They agreed to build a railway between Khosravi and Baghdad, and a sister city agreement between Tehran and Baghdad was also concluded during the visit. According to President's office, Pezeshkian said developing rail and road network links with Iraq is one of Iran's priorities. He said it would pave the way toward more investment, common markets, and port development. He highlighted that security along Iran and Iraq's shared border was key to facilitating trade and transit links. Al-Zaidi welcomed enhanced trade ties and praised Tehran's political and practical support to Iraq in the fight against terrorism. The Iraqi Prime Minister said Baghdad will not tolerate any hostile activity from its soil against Iran and is committed to security agreements with its neighbor as it continues to battle some terrorist elements. On the sidelines of the visit, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told reporters that he was optimistic about the positive outcome of the agreements signed on Thursday. When asked whether the Iraqi Prime Minister had a message for Iranian officials following his visit to Washington last week, Araghchi said Tehran has no problem with Iraq's mediation. But the main obstacle that remains is what he called America's irrational and excessive approach. Turashi Ralilu from Tehran for A News.
Now, a nationwide power outage has left millions of homes across Georgia without power overnight on Thursday. Authorities say supplies have now been restored, while the cause of the disruption is under investigation. Here's more.
Just after midnight Thursday into Friday, electricity was cut off across all of Georgia. The nationwide outage affected Tbilisi, Batumi, Kutaisi, Zugdidi, Tel Aviv, and every other major city and region simultaneously. The Georgian state electric system says its workers began restoration efforts as soon as it happened, while the cause of the outage was being investigated. One theory that circulated widely pointed to the high-voltage transmission line connecting Georgia and Turkey. The 700 megawatt interconnector is in active use as part of a seasonal power exchange agreement between the two countries. However, authorities pushed back on unverified claims, urging media outlets to rely only on official statements and refrain from spreading misinformation while the situation is under investigation. The outage also disrupted water services. Georgian Water and Power reported that pumping stations automatically shut down when the power failed, leading to reduced water pressure or supply interruptions in those areas. Power restoration work continued through the night in stages, with power returning first to the Mtskheta-Mtianeti region and large parts of Tbilisi. By morning, the Georgian state electric system confirmed that electricity has been fully restored across the entire country. Officials say the exact cause of the incident is still being determined and further details are expected to be released to the public. Nini Nikolaishvili, Batumi, A News.
Now, Afghanistan is looking to deepen its economic partnership with neighboring Uzbekistan as business leaders from both countries meet at the event in Tashkent. Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
A high-level Afghan business delegation led by Afghanistan's Chamber of Commerce and Investment Chairman Sayyid Karim Hashimi visited Uzbekistan, where a joint Afghanistan-Uzbekistan private sector business forum has been held in the Sirdarya region. The forum brought together a 100-member Afghan delegation, along with hundreds of Uzbek traders, investors and business representatives to discuss ways of expanding bilateral economic cooperation. Addressing the forum, the Sirdarya governor emphasized expanding joint investment, developing new regional transit corridors and improving conditions for trade between Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. For his part, ACCI chairman invited Uzbek investors to take part in joint investment projects in Afghanistan. He also called for regular joint trade exhibitions and the establishment of a joint private sector committee to strengthen business ties. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's Ministry of Mines and Petroleum says several Uzbek investors have expressed interest in investing in the country's mining sector, particularly in lead and zinc mines, as well as setting up a modern mineral processing plant inside Afghanistan. Ministry officials have welcomed the interest and pledged full support for the proposed investments. Adding to the growing economic engagement, Uzbek official statistics show that more than 205,000 Afghan business travelers visited Uzbekistan during the first 6 months of this year, the highest number from any country, highlighting the expanding commercial relationship between the two neighbors. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Now, Pakistan is pushing back against the European Union's latest assessment of its preferential trade status with the bloc. Islamabad says the report overlooks years of reforms to the arrangement. The dispute comes as Pakistan also faces new pressure over its trading relationship with the United States. Miriam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan on Thursday rejected the EU's latest assessment of the country's preferential status under a trade scheme known as GSP+. GSP+ grants zero import tax on most goods from developing countries, as long as they adhere conventions on labor, human rights, and other practices. Pakistan is the largest beneficiary of the incentive. The EU is Pakistan's biggest export market, accounting for more than a quarter of exports. The latest assessment is based on a report by the European Commission that was published on the 17th of July. It acknowledges Pakistan's progress on prison reforms, anti-torture measures, labor rights, and human rights institutions. But it raises concerns over other matters, such as litigation against journalists, freedom of expression, enforced disappearances, and the detention and trial of opposition leaders. The report says legislative reforms must now translate into improvements on the ground. Pakistan's Foreign Office spokesman said the report understates the reforms the country has made since it joined the scheme in 2014. He said it gives disproportionate attention to areas where progress has been slower. The exchange comes as the United States has just imposed 10 to 12.5% tariffs on Pakistani imports over forced labor concern, adding to the international scrutiny of Pakistan's human rights and labor standards. Mariam Sia, A News, Islamabad.
All right, after the break, we'll take a look at all the top stories making the headlines today. Stay with us. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump says he's considering what he calls a massive attack on Iran, with some of the biggest strikes seen in the conflict so far. It comes after Trump warned that the U.S. would hold the Iranian regime responsible for Houthi strikes on cargo vessels in the Red Sea. Here's more.
The United States has carried out a 13th straight night of strikes on Iran, according to U.S. Central Command. President Donald Trump recently announced an increase in military action and said more U.S. service members had been killed. On Thursday, Trump warned Iran and its Houthi allies of what he called major military punishment. The warning came after Houthi fighters attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea, threatening another major shipping route in the Middle East. The growing conflict pushed Brent crude oil above $100 a barrel for the first time since May, with markets reacting to fears of a disruption to global energy supplies. Trump also said the United States would use Iranian money under Washington's control to pay for any damage caused to ships and cargo. Iran's foreign minister on Friday said if one country can confiscate another's assets, it creates, quote, an incendiary precedent. Meanwhile, Iran's health ministry said U.S. airstrikes since June 27th have killed 53 people and injured 592 others. Officials said more than 500 of the injured have been discharged from hospital, while 36 remain under treatment. Eyewitness video from the Shalamche border crossing with Iraq showed fires and damaged buildings after what Iranian officials described as a U.S. missile strike. Iranian state media reported 2 people were killed and 11 others were wounded. Iran's military also said it launched new drone attacks on 3 U.S. military bases in Kuwait, targeting ammunition depots, fuel storage sites, and military supplies.
Now, the European Union has adopted its 21st sanctions package against Russia, with top diplomats calling it the toughest set of penalties in 4 years. The EU's grip on everything from Moscow's shadow oil fleet to its cyber espionage operations is being tightened.
The European Union has adopted its 21st sanctions package against Russia. It is the most extensive list of penalties enacted in 4 years, and it casts a wide net across critical sectors. In the area of finance, the EU is tightening restrictions on the Moscow exchange and blocking the A7 cross-border payment network. It's also explicitly banning crypto services operating in third countries that help Moscow evade sanctions. Beyond the financial sector, This new sanctions package directly targets Russia's military, cutting the supply chain for long-range drones and adding 51 entities to the export control list. In the cyber warfare sector, a first. The EU is directly holding Russia's notorious FSB 16th Centre accountable for cyber espionage and sabotage across member states. And on human rights, the package freezes the assets of 15 individuals and one entity linked to war crimes and the torture of Ukrainian prisoners of war. While those sectors face strict bans, the core economic battleground remains energy. The EU is locking in a new price cap on Russian oil at $44 a barrel for the next 12 months. Look at the numbers. The global market price for a barrel of crude sits near $80. The original 2022 price cap was $60. By forcing the ceiling down to $44, Brussels aims to sharply cut Moscow's primary revenue stream. To enforce this, the EU has blacklisted more tankers operating in Russia's shadow fleet, targeting vessels that transport oil outside the radar. However, passing a sanctions package requires unanimous consent from all member states. Consensus requires concessions. The final document includes significant carve-outs designed to protect domestic economies. Greece secured an exemption, allowing its shipping fleet to transport Russian LNG to non-EU countries. Following pressure from Bulgaria, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church and the founder of Lukoil were removed from the blacklist. Portugal and Germany blocked a proposed ban on Russian seafood imports. And Austria delayed sanctions against an investment firm linked to Raiffeisen Bank, a company that is currently exposed to over €2 billion in losses in Russia. The 21st package tightens the financial grip on Moscow, but the final draft reflects a complex balancing act, maintaining a united European front while protecting domestic economies.
Now, two Kazakhstan-based companies have been sanctioned by the European Union over alleged links to Russia's supply chains. The EU's 21st package targets Russia's energy, financial and defense sectors, while tightening restrictions on companies accused of helping Moscow bypass existing measures. It also includes firms based in Kyrgyzstan, Turkey, the UAE, India, and China. A weather front has killed 13 people and left 4 missing in central Chile, while flooding and damage have caused widespread water outages and road closures. Authorities declared a state of catastrophe in Coquimbo region and northern Huasco province, with water trucks being deployed to affected communities. A new weather front is expected to bring further snowfall in mountainous areas, although forecasters say associated rainfall should remain within normal levels. Now, India has been named as one of the potential suppliers of defense goods to Armenia. New figures show a rise in flights carrying military cargo from India to the Caucasus in recent months.
As Baku continues to advance its peace agenda with Armenia and take concrete steps towards lasting stability, new figures are raising questions over Yerevan's military procurement. According to data obtained by Minval Politica, from what it describes as reliable sources, the number of flights transporting military cargo from India to Armenia increased tenfold between April and June, compared with the same period last year. The report says Armenia received 18 flights by military aircraft or civilian planes capable of carrying military cargo during that period. 4 of those flights reportedly came from Russia. Looking at the first 6 months of the year, the report says Armenia received at least 37 such flights in total, 15 from India, 13 from Russia, 4 from Iran, 2 from Belgium, and 1 each from Germany, the UAE, and the Netherlands. According to the report, 23 of those 39 flights passed through Iranian airspace. It says the flights were carried out by Armenian Air Force 1 Noel 76 TD transport aircraft. The figures come as Yerevan continues to publicly emphasize its commitment to peace, raising questions over the scale of military cargo being transported to Armenia. Azerbaijan has repeatedly called for a lasting peace agreement with Armenia, while stressing the importance of transparency transparency, confidence-building measures and genuine steps towards regional stability. The Armenian government has not commented on the claims yet.
All right, that was Prime Time for today. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.